Welcome everybody to our presentation from Howard Bunsis today, the financial state of PSU. Before we get started, I just want to share some acknowledgements, and the first one is a land acknowledgement. So I would like to acknowledge, sorry, now I have to find my, I have it written down and now I need the notes. So I'm sorry, I don't have it memorized, but as we know, Portland State University is on tribal lands, many different tribes of the Columbia River Gorge and the Willamette Valley. If you want to learn more about lands where you reside, you can always visit nativelands.ca and do that exploration. I would encourage you to learn more about the many indigenous and native tribes that whose land we inhabit. So with that, I also want to move on and say some thank yous to people who are involved in PSU-AAUP, our executive council. Myself, I probably didn't introduce myself. I'm Emily Ford. I'm the president of PSU-AAUP. I use she, her pronouns. I've been president for about a month and a half. And our executive council, newly elected executive council, is listed here. And they do a lot of work for our union. And then I'd also like to thank the collective bargaining team and our staff. I want to point out that Jennifer Kearns was the one, a past president and collective bargaining team member, organized this with Howard for Howard to be here today. So thank you so much to Jennifer. And then finally, we'll be using chat for questions and chatter. If you put something in the Q&A, I'll make sure that we get it over into chat. Howard is going to try and answer questions as they come in, but I'll also be paying attention just in case something gets missed. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to David Kinsella, who will introduce Howard.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the collective bargaining team, it's my pleasure to introduce Howard Bunsis. As you know, we are in the middle of a bargaining reopener, and this is happening in the midst of the highest inflation rates in 4 decades. At PSU, we are also experiencing declining enrollments and have been for several years now, which creates very real financial challenges for the university. So our question for Howard, as always, is how dire really is PSU's financial position? We've gotten used to the pessimistic budget narratives from university administration, but we look to Howard Bunsis and his expertise to provide a counterbalancing perspective. He's particularly well qualified to look at the financial situation of public universities, which operate within complex funding sources within the constraints of state law. Having his perspective is absolutely essential as the bargaining team negotiates cost of living salary adjustments and other benefits for our members. Howard Bunsis has served AAUP National in many roles, including as a treasurer and a chair of the Collective Bargaining Congress, and has given numerous presentations to AAUP chapters throughout the country, including ours, on multiple occasions. He is past president and past treasurer of the AAUP chapter at Eastern Michigan University, where he is professor in the College of Business, specializing in governmental and nonprofit accounting. Professor Bunsis has a PhD in accounting from the University of Chicago and has a law degree from Fordham Law School. At EMU, he teaches courses in finance law as well as accounting. Welcome, Howard. We wish we had you here in person, but the virtual floor is yours.
All right. Well, David, thank you. It's great to be back. I wish I were there also. Been coming to PSU many times over many years, and always loved being there. Always enjoyed the people, always felt welcome, and really always worked well with everyone there, and over all the years and everything we've been through together, and there's still more to come. I will address The issues on the enrollment decline and inflation are certainly a big part of the presentation, but I do not share the view that PSU is in any sort of dire financial shape. And I don't tell you, I'm not telling you guys what I think you want to hear. I'm telling you what I think is the truth. And this presentation is 104 slides short. I know the tension may wane. If I skip over slides, it's because in the interest of time and keeping people's interest, I don't want to go over details that I think aren't critical to the overall analysis, but I will certainly spend, I'm not going to rush through things, and certainly will spend time and answer any questions you have as they're coming up. So don't be shy about doing it. And I will send this presentation to you. It's being recorded, obviously. But as soon as we're done and I make sure that there's nothing else I have to fix in it, I will send it to you guys tonight, and it is yours to use as you see fit. And we are, at Eastern Michigan, I'm not in the leadership anymore, but I am involved with the bargaining. We are bargaining now, but we're at a point now we can't even agree whether we're going to bargain virtually or in person. So we have not even started bargaining. Though we have proposals, but we haven't even shared them. So I think you guys are a little ahead of us as to where we are. But I certainly am very keen to know what's going on with bargaining around the country, and certainly understand that. So without any further ado, I have a little roadmap here. You can get a sense of what we're doing here. We look at the balance sheet, do Moody's ratios. HERF stands for Higher Education Emergency Relief Funds. And there were 3 different acts. And I think one of the big takeaways for me is how much money Portland State still had not collected as of the end of 21, and how it's probably going to help them significantly. We are going to take a deep dive. You can see how many pages. We take a very deep dive into enrollment, and also the state appropriation. And there's really good news there. Not good news, obviously, with enrollment, but we'll take a deep dive into it. We'll look at tuition price. Yes, it's $28 million that they haven't collected yet, as I'll show you. $28 million that they have yet, completely discretionary, no matter what they say. And they'll argue with almost everything I say, but they'll certainly argue with that. We'll look at the expenses and cash flows and that kind of stuff. I am still surprised in today's world that even today, the number of administrators keeps going up at PSU and the number of faculty keeps going down, even in the midst of the pandemic. I don't get how that happens, but we'll look at salaries. I'm a huge sports fan, so I love sports, but I will demonstrate once again that PSU athletics is not a money-making proposition. And then we'll look at some nice stuff at the end. So let's talk about these overall conclusions. First sentence, solid financial condition. This conclusion is supported by solid reserves and cash flows, modest debt, increasing state support. Decline in enrollment is a main source of concern. The bond rating is A1. And this quote, the administration at PSU puts out a financial dashboard document, which the documents that have also been sent to me, they've made one other presentation, one other statement in the last month or so, and they've all actually, both of those actually grabbed from this financial dashboard document that the administration puts out. And this quote is right from them. This is what Moody's calls A1. And the administration at PSU capitalized the word strong. That's not me. They actually capitalized the word strong. So just start out with that. Now, they will argue that, that doesn't mean, it just means we're not going bankrupt. It doesn't mean, it means a lot more than that. So we're going to talk about the enrollment decline, and it has been larger than most peer institutions. State appropriation has been increasing. The state's got a very strong bond rating, and we don't know what's going to happen in the 2023-25 biennium yet. There's been a proposal made for the higher education appropriation, but it's definitely going to be higher. There definitely was a decline in auxiliary revenue, housing, dining, parking, athletics. But total revenues were fairly stable as there's support from feds, state, to deal with those things. Next, more conclusions. The increased number of administrators, it's really alarming. But the next one was really the most surprising, looking at the peers, PSU spends a higher percent of total salaries on administration than every other peer. That is a fact. And a decrease in tenure track, increase in non-tenure track, which is typical. We see it almost every university. And so I saw the document they put out, I think last week or a week and a half ago. Yeah, I think it was last week, that they need to make cuts. And we did see student credit hours declined 5.9% from fall 20 to fall 21. Head count, a little different. We'll talk about what the different, why these two percentages are different. Went down 3.8 over this period. PSU has over $180 million in unrestricted reserves. They're getting $228 million this year. State appropriation is going up $7 million. I don't see where the problem is. The only thing that should be cut is administration. The other thing I'll say is, and the administration, I'm sure, will say they do everything they can. Instead of cutting, I think the emphasis should be on student retention, if I'm allowed to put in my 2 cents. And I'll show you the numbers to support that. And that's just not me saying, oh, keep all the students. I'll show you numbers that I think support that. So let's look at the balance sheet itself. And you can see the assets. We'll take a brief look at what makes up these assets. The net assets, and we'll figure out how much of that 600 million are true reserves, and is there too much debt? But I think what you could just see in general, we got assets growing, reserves growing, debt declining, which is good in general. But you can't make overall conclusions based on just this picture, but it doesn't help. It doesn't hurt. We make some adjustments to the pen. I'm not going to deal with the adjustments. PSU administration makes the adjustments. They report the adjustments. It's not controversial. I just put them in there if you want to look at them. So this is what the assets are. And this picture actually understates what's happening. What I mean is this following. First, the capital assets, we'll look at the orange bar, and 450 million to 609 million. Grant funded positions, all that matters is, are they paying yes or no? And if stuff comes from the outside grant income, then it shows up as grant income, and we'll see that as grant income. We'll get there. We'll show you what the grant. There's a whole line. It's the third biggest line item for the university in terms of grant in and versus the dollars out. So the capital assets you can see going up by a lot. And there's been new buildings, and from what I read, there are 2 new buildings either just started or going to start. These 2 things here. Are these things happening? Are these things both going to happen? I mean, I don't live there, so I don't know. Yes, no, maybe. I believe so, says Emily. And that's always a good thing. The joke I always say is, how do you know if the university is in good financial condition? Well, go on campus and see if there are construction cranes. If there are construction cranes, that means good. Yeah, so moving right now, so that's good. So that's always good. Now, I want the green bar, cash and investments. This has nothing to do with the foundation. Not $1 of this is part of the foundation. 140 million 6 years ago, and now it's 228 million. The reason these are growing is because every year PSU is taking in more than they're spending. Every single year, as we'll show you. And so that's why the cash balance and the investments grow, not just the returns overall. And when you look at cash and investments versus debt, we got cash growing, debt going down. Again, very good. Now, with the foundation, I'm not making any claim whatsoever that PSU could use foundation assets for ordinary expenses like faculty salaries or AP salaries. None of that. But it's nice that these are going up. As I'll show you on the next slide, there is some support from the foundation for the core operations of the university. But we'll see some things aren't going great with the foundation. So at the bottom here, you can see the foundation in terms of the revenues versus expenses. Counting that as they don't take in that much. They don't raise that much money. There's some investment income. You can see 2021 was by far the best year. That's obviously going to change when 2022 is written. And we're almost done with that year. In 15 days, 15 days, we're done with the current fiscal year. And this is the amount that the foundation gives to the university for various, whatever they are, scholarships, typically to fund scholarships and things of that nature. And you can see the percentage of expenses, though it was big in 15, the last 5 or 6 years, about 3% of the total expense. PSU spends about $500 million a year on everything, not just comp, everything, cutting the grass, stuff, consultants, everything. That's what they spend. And about 3% is covered by the foundation, which is fine. Doesn't mean it's good or bad. But the bad part are the returns. And there's some discrepancy in what PSU administration claims their returns are and what the documents say the returns are. And the PSU administration claims that the 2021 return was 25%. That is simply not true. There's no way that's true. First, they say that was only on the endowment. Well, the endowment is 98 million, as they call it. The foundation has a portfolio of 140 million. And so to exclude the total return in the difference between the foundation and the rest of the endowment is it doesn't matter. It's money that the foundation has. And a lot of it is restricted, of course, but doesn't, in terms of calculating a return, to exclude $42 million in the denominator is, I don't know what word I want to use, but not, I'll just say not accurate. And they may claim that this return is net of investment fees. My answer to that is, well, if that's true, stop paying fees and invest in plain vanilla funds. And their portfolio is somewhat on the risky side, not terribly so, but they put about 15% of their portfolio in hedge funds and things like that nature, things of that nature. But they have not been doing well. The blue is the S&P 500. And the other thing the administration say, we don't care what the market does. We only care what other schools do. Well, I think all of us know that most of us are invested in plain vanilla funds. Why can't they do the same thing? Why can't they do the same thing? Stop with the fees, stop all the different investing. Don't hire all these people. Just put your money in some funds and let it go. They'll have to answer to that. Okay, reserves over time. The reason reserves are growing is they're taking more cash than they spend. And this is nice. 21 was helped by federal and state support. And we'll see how big the reserves are. So something called the primary reserve ratio. The phrase expendable net assets is a proxy for reserves. It's complicated the way it's determined. These numbers come from the administration's own calculations. So I did not calculate these reserve ratios. The administration calculated them in their financial documents. So in this, I use both in a combination like they do and I do, combination of the audited financial statements and that financial dashboard that the administration puts out. So, and you can see the ratios going up every year. And this is how many months they have in reserve. So 49% is just under 6 months of expense and reserves. And that's pretty solid, as we'll see on the next slide. So this is what Moody's considers the benchmarks at a different level of reserves. 100% is exception. And 50% to 100, that's the excellent cutoff. So PSU is here, just under 50, between the very good line and the excellent. These words, by the way, are not mine. Those are Moody's words, the way Moody's parcels out these definitions. So in terms of the foundation, there's money back and forth from the foundation. You are correct. There's money back and forth for PSU pays for some of the admin costs of the foundation. I think, Emily, that's what you're likely referring to. To me, the amount of money was not, it's hard to look at the public data and suggest that they're spending too much money on fundraising and things of that nature. My concern is that they're not investing the right way, that they should be more, they should be investing plain vanilla, in a plain vanilla way, and not trying to use hedge funds to beat the market. I don't think it works in general. And I say that as a huge New York Met fan owned by one of the largest hedge fund managers in the world. So there you go. Okay, viability ratio, another ratio that's used. These ratios are reported in that financial dashboard. So I thought, to me, you guys are in the middle of negotiations. If they talk about these things, I want you guys to know what's going on. And the viability ratio says, do we have too much debt? I mean, do we have enough reserves compared to debt? And generally, the answer is clearly yes. Again, we're in that above excellent here. Not 300% is quite a high hurdle to get to exceptional, but still in a very good place. Why? There's solid reserves and not that much debt comparatively. The gap between revenue and budget is covered by reserves. You know, look, let me say this about budgets. Pardon my language. The word budgets starts with B and ends with S. I'm not being facetious. Budgets are BS. They are not helpful in assessing financial health. Universities create budgets with whatever rules they want. What they do with budgets is they exclude a bunch of revenues, include whatever they want for expenses, and they make estimates. I don't think they're worth the paper they're written on. Who determines how the foundation? The foundation has a board, and it's in the document. The foundation has a board, and they have an investment committee. And whenever you bring this issue up, from Luke, whenever you bring this issue up, they get very, very sensitive. Oh, we know what we're doing. We know how to invest. You don't understand that the S&P 500 should not be the benchmark. Well, we ran it, at my place, we've done the same thing. Myself and a finance professor, we've demonstrated the same graph that I showed here. And it did not get a good reception from the administration. They believe they're investing the right way. I don't think we're going to change those decisions. However, it points to the way they run the place. So there's that. But in terms of budgets, they just do not tell the story. They have to fill a budget hole. No, all that matters is how they did. What happened? What actually happened? Not what they say is going to happen based on some revenues versus some expenses that they estimated. All that matters, what I'm showing you in this document, is what actually happened. I understand budgets have to be made to keep departments in line, but they are not useful at all in assessing financial health, no matter what. And the admin that's all they care about is the budget, because they live with the budget. That's all they do is budget, budget, budget. And they use it, as was written in the chat just now, to claim we're not meeting budget, every department every tub on its own bottom, make every department a profit center. It's all wrong. It's all wrong. Looking at department by departments as mini profit centers, a university does not make products. They're not selling this. It's a completely different kind of institution than a manufacturing firm. And the budget speak that universities use and the budget processes they use assume that they're a manufacturing company. I understand how seriously people take budgets, and we'll look at the COVID money is drying up. I understand that, but it's still very large. It's still very large. And we're going to look at the enrollment changes over time and see what's in those numbers. Dig really deep into those numbers to see how things look. But to make cuts, the document I saw last week that was put out by the admin last week said, let's just talk about what to cut. My advice is never get in a room with them and talk about what we should cut. They want your cover. If they're committed to making these cuts, well, they're going to do it. I think they're going to make bad decisions, but they're going to do it. They just want your support for doing what they're going to do anyway. And I don't think you should get in a room with them and talk. And what I saw, I don't get to see every document, but Jennifer sent me that document in particular, which I thought was striking. But very funny, Sonia. Very funny. I get that sarcasm, I believe. Okay. Cash flows, I do think, are really, 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 really important. And This is what happened. Yeah, the kicker, let me address, the kicker is once the revenue from the state of Oregon goes above a certain level, the rainy day fund goes above a certain level, they got to start giving money back to people. And the budget request by the Higher Education Coordinating Commission for 23-25 certainly addressed the issue of the kicker. And even in that, they are asking for, they're not going to get, but they're asking for huge increases, talking $20-30 million a year, as I'll show you, in appropriation just to PSU. They're not going to get that. I think they're going to get something closer to 10 to 15. That's what, my reading of the situation is. Am I an expert? No, but I've been looking at these government documents from HECC and the legislature here for a long time. And yeah, in terms of internalizing it, you believe the stories, you believe it. But look at this slide, look at the cash flows. This is all the operational cash in and all the operational cash out. So what do I exclude? Well, I use the cash flow statement itself. I don't include the capital stuff. I don't include cash in from debt proceeds. I don't include investment income. I don't include cash out for debt payments. I don't include the cash out for capital acquisitions. But it's all the operational cash, everything in versus everything out. And this is cash. And they match what's on the, without getting into the counting of it, they match what's on the, shall we say, income statement in terms of the amount they recognize, whether they collect it or not. And you can see the decline in auxiliaries. We're going to dig into that decline in auxiliaries. You can see it right there, 86 to 76 to 54. We're going to go into that. Someone asked about the funding from the outside. This was curious. This, this right here, you could see the funding. These are research grants, mostly research grants, and a lot of it is to pay for, like the question earlier said, was to pay for some people's salaries. That's definitely the case, and that's a large portion of this money. And this was the and this is the lowest it's been. And there's no detail provided in the financials to know what's the source of this decline. And we could try to find out. Here's the HERF funds themselves, and they're going to be a lot bigger in 22. The other thing I thought was curious, you can see the payments to employees. This is everybody, comp and benefits, everybody. You can see it actually went down from 20 to 21. And payments to suppliers got lower, and then student financial aid. And so 499 in, 468 out, plus 31. Look at these numbers. They're, other than 17, where it was a little higher, they're consistently in the 40 million dollar range every year. This is why reserves are growing. This is why they have an A1 bond rating. This is why Moody's says they have strong cash flows and reserves. This is not me saying it. This is what anyone who looks at this will tell you. And the administration will say, oh, we can't use that money. Oh, that money's tied up. No, it's not. No, it's not. They just choose not to spend it. And they're choosing to create the surplus every year. Now, another way of looking at how much money they're taking versus paying out is the concept. It's not a new concept, but for Moody's, it is new. It's called EBITDA. EBITDA stands for earnings before interest, depreciation, and amortization. I think the majority of you may not be familiar with it. I think a lot of you are, and it's now used by Moody's. It's similar to cash flows, and it's what Moody's is using right now in their assessment. And Moody's does, on August 5th, as we'll see, on August 5th, before this document came out, 2021, Moody's affirmed the A1 stable rating for PSU. That is a fact. That did happen. They have not issued a rating since that time. It's not quite a year from now. And they have that was issued before the document that the 2021 audited statements came out. But these are solid margins, so somewhat higher than 18, but lower than 19 and 20. But still, what I do here is look at the difference between operating cash flows and EBITDA. They're both measures of cash flows. The reason why EBITDA was bigger here was because the PSU got a big capital appropriation in 19. I don't include any capital stuff in cash flows. I don't include any this appropriation is just operational. No capital appropriation for buildings and things of that nature. But there was these are kind of lumpy. So I think this is a better metric, and you can see it went down when you look at it compared to that. It went down, but still positive, still nice and positive. So it's still nice and juicy. Okay, so Moody's. And this is the new rating system that Moody's now uses. They've gone through 4 iterations since 2013, if you could believe that. And this is where they are now. And the bond rating of PSU is, where my cursor is, kind of like there. A1, which is pretty close to AA3. It's like, I'm trying to move it, like I'm not doing a good job. It's right there. And you can see some of the variables for the 6 have AA. 2 of them are rated. The weaker ones are the EBITDA margin, which I think is a little smaller, which I showed you, that's 7%. And the cash and investments to operating expenses, that's the 0.49 is right there. It's just missing here, but that's where it is. It's 0.49, it goes right there. But overall, this just gives you a visual that things are going fine. And these are, these are the specifics. Moody's, they have an A1 rating. The score says they should have an A1 rating. And debt service coverage, do they generate enough cash to cover debt service? Yes, easily. This is coming from the financial dashboard. So discussing the 6 measures, size is better. That's that one. This is cash flows. It's kind of like cash flows. More liquidity is better. This is like reserves. So it just gives you a general overview of the ratios. And this is the overall summary summarized by the administration. Comprehensive urban public university with large and diverse source of revenue, strong cash flows, strong reserves, manageable level of debt. That's the word that the administration used right there, manageable. So I decided if they used it, I'm going to use it. They pointed to the high acceptance rate, the administration did. That's not something I'm not convinced is necessarily an issue as to why enrollment's declining. I don't see them. And the claim is, okay, since you take in almost everyone who applies, there's no room to increase enrollment. I'm not quite sure I see it that way. And then they do mention significant competition in the Oregon market, which, as you know, you're not the only public university in the state. So these are the ratings. A1 is 1 level below that. It's 1 tick below. And most of the other peers, and I'll show you the peers in a bit on the next slide, most of the peers did not have a Moody's rating or were part of a system, so didn't have a separate rating. Portland State, as many of you know, Portland State used to be part of OUS, the Oregon University System, which was disbanded in 14, 15. I have a crying dog. Just a sec. Sorry. Okay, Roxy. Okay. I know. You want to see Mom and Sam came home. By the way, that's Mom, that's Sam in the background, that's Joshua, the one that's Roxy, that's the Huron River here. So sorry, I'm back. It wasn't long. Okay, so bond rating looks, but most of them, like Southern, Eastern, Western Oregon, they would all have lower bond ratings if they had separate ratings. And so here's the list of peers. Okay, what did I do here? I used a peer list last time I did this, which is 3 years ago. And since that time, these 3 things have come out. When I say all admin, this task force is all administrators. Now, there are some faculty who have faculty rank, but they're serving in admin roles. So the people on the committee were all administrators. The IPEDS peers are completely chosen by the administration. This group, which was very similar to what we used before, had students and faculty on it. And not surprisingly, it was similar to what we used before. So, but I wanted to be fair to the admin. So I did add the numbers in parentheses are, of the 4 lists, how many times did these schools appear on those lists? So UMass Boston appeared on both of these admin lists. And to be fair to I put them on there, even though they were not on this list and we didn't use it last time. So I thought that was fine. And so that's that. So I tried to be consistent with what we did before, but also be considerate of the new list that we're at. So this is the final P list that I used for this document. So this is the distribution of Moody's bond ratings at the end of 21. This is Portland State. You can see in higher education, which is solid. And so summary, as I said before, solid reserves, cash flows, debt, manageable. Here's my discussion of budget holes. Budget holes and budget deficits, I don't see it. These deficits are self-created and not supported by the actual results. So, all right. And we'll look at it, now we're going to look at the revenue side. So here's the revenue side. What we have on the revenue side, didn't we just reduce the minimum GPA required for admission? When do we have too much? You know, it's an interesting point. I was surprised to see that. I was really surprised to see that comment by the administration in the, I took that from the, I don't the financial dashboard is not, that's a document that's a serious document put together by people who know what they're doing. And if they wrote it, I'm like, all right, well, they must be something going on here. Maybe, the only thing I'll say is maybe Moody's considers that a negative in general as they look at all of higher ed, but I don't know. I really don't know how that affects things or how true that is. And that's so, I think schools also manipulate that percentage that they say they accept. I was very surprised to see it cited, but I'm reporting to you, all of you. I want to give you guys everything. So I'm reporting to all of you everything I saw. So there we go. All right. What do we see in the revenues? Here's the decline in auxiliary: housing, dining, student union, bookstore, parking, athletics. They provide additional support for those students aside from the summer bridge. Yeah, Leanne, we're going to get to me. And again, I don't work there. Just because I've been there a lot, I'm not an expert on PSU's enrollment at all. I don't claim to be. But I am going to give you my view from the outside on the retention issue and what happens to people on the way in. And if you could just wait on that, I promise I'm going to get there. Yeah. Look, Elena, assessments, predictions of the future are predictions of the future. I've been coming to PSU for over 15 years now. They've been saying the same thing every single time the end is near. Look at the results. All we see are positive cash flows each and every year. That's all we ever see are positive cash flows. If it's so bad, then why do we see such strength every year? Why is there an A1 bond rating? I just don't believe their projections. I think their projections, again, they don't include everything you see on this slide here. They just don't. They exclude whatever they feel like excluding, and their projections, they are overly pessimistic in predicting revenues and overly pessimistic in predicting future expenses to create the need in their minds for cuts. And then when they make change, then they'll also say, oh, it's because of how frugal we are. That's why we're in such good shape. Really, I'm not buying that. So this is the lumpy capital appropriation we saw right here. I talked about 19, that's that lumpy one, 20 to 60 to 30. You can see it's much different than any other years. But here's auxiliaries. I'm going to look at that. And the one comment that Moody's made, diversity of revenue sources. I do a lot of work with private universities, and I've done a lot with private universities in your state. This number, this first percentage, is double, sometimes 2.5 times this large for a private university. The reason public universities generally have pretty solid bond ratings is they have a diversity of revenue sources. There's a lot of research going on at PSU. That's a big number. That's a big number, as we'll see. So That helps quite a bit in easing any declines from enrollment, which, and you can see, look at tuition revenue. I'm not 194, 193, 187, 178. So there's no way we're shying away from that. That's definitely happening. But overall, the revenues, they did go down from 20 to 21. They did. Not a huge amount, but they did go down. When you look at the main sources, and I put the HERF money in the grants, little increase in grant, little increase in the state, somewhat alleviated the decline in tuition revenue and a decline in auxiliary. But this graph gives you an overall sense of the different revenue sources, their contribution, and the direction in the last 6-7 years. So now let's talk HERF money. So PSU, according to them, is taking in $105 million over this 3-4 year period. This much has to go to students. I'm not even discussing that money. I'm not even remotely considering the middle column. It's just this column here. They've only booked that much. And so they've got a whole bunch coming in. So God bless them. So I think it's going to be good. So I think that's good. All right. Now let's dig into enrollment. And I focus on headcount. I know that in the conversations I've had with the team, the administration is focusing on credit hours as their source of the enrollment change. I understand credit hours map into tuition revenue, but so does headcount. And the Higher Education Coordinating Committee, yes, exactly right, Rob. The HECC, the official enrollment numbers are not headcount, are not credit hours, they're headcount. And I'll show you that most of the time, headcount and enrollment are the same. Headcount and student credit hours are the same, but this last year they diverged. So first, you could just see the general decline. Describe the visuals to be, when they say here, this or that, I don't know quite what that question means, but I'll do the best I can to explain everything I can. So you can see that enrollment in generally is coming down. And we had an increase from, I go all the way back to 08. And you can see it's generally coming down. This last line here is the percent of total enrollment as undergrad. It hasn't changed in 8 years, 9 years, 10 years. It hasn't really changed. It was a little lower back here, but in the last 10 years, it's still roughly 80% undergrad, which is, I'm not saying good or bad, just is. So I'm not going to, this is a lot of numbers. The number change and the percentage change, you can see I highlighted things have been worse, there's no doubt. Though you do have that little increase in grad this last year. So this tells a story. This is the annual change in headcount. We are going to get the credit hours, I promise. And there's credit hours going down 5.9%. But this is still, when you look at this historically, when you look at these last few years historically, it's very different from the years before it. And the one thing I will say for the administration, this has got them scared. This right here, because this is not like this 3-year period, not like any of the periods they've had before, and obviously not like that, what we had before that. So this is what it is. This is the way the enrollment has changed. Total headcount enrollment changes. Again, this is 5.9 right here. This is 5.9 using credit hours. This is 7.4 using headcount or credit hours. Same exact percentage. Here, that one there. So now what I did here is I broke up the period. I have 08 to 22. That's a long period of time. So I broke it up into 3 sub-periods, 08 to 14, 14 to 19. And the reason I stopped at 19 is kind of like the last pandemic year, right before the pandemic till now. And you can see things were very different. This is the undergrad in the blue, the purplish, is that a fair way to say it? I don't know. It seems purple to me. In the grad, and then the gray is everybody. So that's the way I did this. So you could see, not so great here, but worse here. Grad enrollment not down as much as undergrad enrollment in these last couple of years, but still overall, last 3+ years, it's a pretty significant drop in enrollment. The total, the gray is the total. So I'm not shying away from this picture, and certainly it's not pretty. And I understand, again, we combine these two pictures. This is total headcount. This is the last 3 years here, year by year. This one is trying to get at more than just an annual change, but trying to group years to give a broader picture, shall we say. Now, usually we've always believed, those of us who analyze this data, have always believed that there is an inverse relationship. That means as unemployment goes up, enrollment goes up. Well, we saw that here. And as the reverse as well, as unemployment came down, we saw declines in enrollment here. I just think the last 3 years are just so different. The unemployment rate, as I'll show you, these are just the annual unemployment rates. When you look at it, when we break up 2020, we're going to see how different 2020 was in here. But we're seeing declines that the slope of this is more significant than the slope here. So, and unemployment now is very low, as I'll show you in a bit. Unemployment now is pretty low in the state and nationally, which generally does not bode well for enrollment when unemployment is so low. I'm sure you've all heard the story about how many jobs there are out there that are unfilled. Yeah. Okay. I had counted credit hours percentage-wise, my specific baseline relative to the prior year, to answer the question. They're always to the prior year or a couple of years ago, whatever. If it's a longer period of time, it's a longer period of time. So that's the enrollment picture. I looked at enrollment by residency, and I saw something here that may or may not surprise you. So the blue is from the state of Oregon. The red is from the US, but not from Oregon. And then the green is international. All right. And you can see it hasn't changed that much. Yeah, Rob writes in the chat about if there's a recession, there should be an increase in enrollment. I'm not convinced. I think today's times are so different. I'm not sure how it's going to go anymore. This graph, I go back to this graph. I mean, you look at this graph, you look at the decline in, the red on the right, that's the unemployment rate. And as it came down, we did see declines in enrollment, but it's just hard for me to know, if this goes back up again, if this red line goes back up again, it's likely, I'll give you this, it's likely there'll be an increase in enrollment. I just don't know how much. It's just hard to know. So here, I noticed something. When you look at this graph without the numbers, international, 7.5% of total enrollment here, down to 4.9% of total enrollment here. All right, it's declined. But then when I looked at the numbers, there were 2,152 international students in 15. And now there's almost half is gone. And if you go back to that year, so in 7-8 years, half the international students have gone away. Was it sudden? look at the declines, 2152 in 16, down to 2136 in 17, down to 1946 and 18, down to 1819, down to 1632 and 20. This was the biggest decline, was right here in international students, from 1632 to 1200. From fall, this is fall 19 to fall 20, right in the middle of the pandemic, right there. COVID as well. Yes, Trump years COVID, Trump and pandemic. I'm reading everything in the chat. Yeah, but my point is, yeah, also what Emily writes about the Middle Eastern universities. When you look at the overall enrollment decline, it's not like there weren't declines from the state of Oregon, but not nearly, and other states. There definitely were declines, but it seems like the decline in international was really more significant on a percentage basis. And that's what I picked up here. I wasn't going to do this graph. And then I did it last night. Yeah. I see. It doesn't make sense what Aaron just put in the chat. So I looked from 19 to 22, international enrollment declined 37%. Now, numbers wise, it's not nearly as big as these declines here. And the domestic, state of Oregon, green, yellow with the blue around it is other states, California being the largest state, largest contributor, and then everybody in gray. Now you look back in time, from 8 to 14, everything is increasing. But look at the increase in international back here. So, look at that increase in international. But still, international, the pinkish, purplish, declined 17% in the middle time frame. And there was a big increase here. And then not so much in out-of-state people here. And I think COVID, man, international loan pains me so much, the bad news for academic intelligence institution. Yeah, it's very difficult. This is difficult for a lot of reasons, but I wasn't, like I said, my first instinct when I look at this graph and the green being international being so small, I'm like, it's too small to matter. But then when I looked at the numbers, I'm like, there's something going on here. And then I did this, and I wanted to show you guys the pink of the international stuff. That's anybody. So I could say to that. So I don't know what the university has said about this, if anything, or if the university is addressing this in any way. I'm not here to tell you they need to, or they should, or they could. I'm here to show you what did happen. And maybe you guys have felt this on your campus. Maybe you've seen fewer international students in your classes or as colleagues of yours. I don't know that. Only you would know that. So anyway, sorry for the bad news. Okay, here's the credit hours. I'm sorry for all the numbers, but now I know, Mark sent me all this stuff on credit hours by all the different terms, and I could have added the years, but fall, the reason I use fall is that's what the HECC uses as their official enrollment day. So, and this is what the university is using as someone put to me, this is what they're rolling with, a 5.9. I'm not saying credit hours are more important than headcount. I think they both matter. So the 5.9% decline in credit hours from fall 20 to fall 21 is real. And this is International Global Studies Department. Yeah, those are the kind of things that Aiden just put in the chat about cutting certain things. Cutting never works. It never works in my estimation. Now, I really, look, I've been there a lot, and I do not want to make, and you guys know I teach a business subject, which is here. I do not want to make any claims that any one college is bigger, better, more important than any other college. I don't believe that. Portland State is a big, comprehensive public university with right now 23,000 students. And to suggest that one department is more than another, that's what the budget does. The budget models that they use do. It pits within colleges department against each other. It pits across colleges against each other. And I've seen it. I've been in these type of presentations myself where I put this kind of data on a screen, and you guys are going to get this, you're going to get this tonight. And I'm just asking, I'm not telling, I'm asking. Don't use this in the wrong way to suggest, oh, there's my department doing really well, my college doing really well. Everyone else is dragging us down. I mean, I bet, there's 70 something people on this call. I imagine there's people from every one of these represented on this call. I think that's a fair assumption to make, except for maybe the joint campus. But, and I don't know what special courses even means, but I probably should take these percentages out. In fact, that's one of the things, the numbers are so small. This is the kind of thing I look at that I'll probably take these are the kind of things I revise, and percentages with really small numbers just don't tell us very much. But these are all red. This is all red for almost every college. There are some colleges that it's not red. If I can make one plug, I am very happy to see the College of Education bucking the trend that's national, especially here in the Midwest. Education, colleges of education in our state it's not pretty from an enrollment perspective. So it's good to see that. It's always good to see these things, but everybody relies on everybody else. And so I want to make that point. Secondly, you could see 7.4% was a decline from fall 19 to fall 20 for credit hours. Something we aren't here in the College of Education. Well, look, if I could say Tracy Williams Murphy in the College of Education, not just bucking the trend here at Portland State, but I could promise you that around the country, this is bucking the trend of college educations around the country. So I don't know how you feel about that. I don't know if it's true, if you believe it, but I'll leave it up to you guys. It's funny, when I did this the first time, I'm sorry to tell you this, I'm like, do I got these years right? So I know this is right because I did it. In instigating into, yeah, what Aiden put in the chat, that's what this does. That's what this kind of graph does. And but I thought it was incumbent. I have to create it. It would, it would be delinquent of me not to report this to you, in my estimation, just because I don't want you guys to, to argue with each other about this. I still think you need to know it. And the 7.4% drop in credit hours from fall 19 to fall 20 exactly matches the 7.4% drop in headcount from 19 to 20. Posterity, you guys are funny. This is the administration likes this to say this is happening. The headcount, this is the headcount drop. I mean, the credit hour drop from 20 to 21. It's bigger than the headcount drop of 3.8. This is what I just a simple calculation over here. I took the head count, credit hours, and divided it by head count. So 10.4 in fall 19 and fall 20, all students. I know it may not be fair to combine grad and undergrad and doctoral students in one, but there's all students on average took 10.4 credit hours per term in that fall term. Then it dropped to 10.1 credit hours per student for fall 21. 10.4 for fall 20 to 10.1 to fall 21 may not seem like a big drop, but it is a big drop. Students, the data here reveals, and I bet if I did this on an undergrad versus grad, it would be even starker. Students took fewer classes. Now, I don't know the reasons for that. Maybe some of you have some insight into why did students on average take fewer credit hours in fall 21 versus fall 20. So Sam Peters writes, from an advisor perspective, students are burned out, pandemic stress. I certainly see that. I certainly see that. Child care issues, Sonia writes. But if you think about it, So much of their story is around credit hours are down 5.9%. We've got to do something. Tracy had lost job, except yeah, we've got to do something. To me, I'm hopeful that students will we look at fall 22, which is coming up obviously before we know it. I'm very curious to see what this 10.1 per student credit hour becomes in fall 22. I predict it will be higher, but maybe I'm wrong. And higher means less of a credit hour drop. So I said we would dig into enrollment. Yeah, the gas costs. Yeah, I see that. You guys are, not everyone lives. The one thing I do know about Portland, since I started coming, the housing prices to live centrally are, as you know, you guys are right in the city. As I recall, the housing prices are not fun. Is that a fair way to put it? That the housing prices are somewhat high. It costs a lot of money to live in the city itself. Exorbitant, horrendous. But can I say this? I think 08 was my first year there, or maybe 07, 08. It was not like that when I first got there. I'm not saying it was poor and run down. It was not like that at all. But I never heard that kind of chatter when I first started coming to Portland. And the last time I was there, that's all I heard was the complaining about the housing costs. And so that means people living further away and not, I mean, you guys, as you know, I don't need to tell you, you're right in the middle of the city. We're going to look at campus housing as well. And we're going to look at that in a bit. Okay, so let's move on. I looked at the other, using the official enrollment stats from the HCCC, the Higher Education Coordinating Commission, the other public universities in the state. 2020 is, just to get this on the table, 2020 is fall 2019, 2021, and I got to fix one of those twos, is fall 2020. See, this is the kind of thing, I got one too many twos in there. 2022 is fall 21, just to put those on the table. And unfortunately, so what I have here, Portland State is the second largest in the state in terms of enrollment, all three periods. The only larger one is OSU. Portland State is larger than University of Oregon. That's what this is telling me here. And then the others, OIT and Eastern, Southern, Western, are all much smaller. The second stuff on the right, the panel on the right, shall we say, this is the percentage change enrollment from 20 to 21, 21 to 22, and then over the 2-year period. Portland State has the 7.8% drop from 20 to 21 is the second most severe decline. The only one that dropped more over that time period was Southern. From 21 to 22, the 3.3% drop. And these numbers are, the reason why these numbers don't quite match the others, they're slightly different by small amounts. I don't know why. They're off by, it's not a tremendous amount, but they're off a little bit. But anyway, this 3.3% is worse, not as bad as Western and OIT. When you take the years together, the 2 years together, Southern and Western have steeper declines than Portland State. Eastern, not as much. Oregon State is growing. UO is down a flat, but down a little. If I'm allowed to put all that out there. I don't know how you guys, on that. It's just stuff to know. This is the peer institution. It's not the Oregon peers, but the peers as we defined them earlier. And this peer group, unfortunately, the change from 19 to 20 and 20 to 21, and then the 2-year change, Portland State is their online school. So Mark writes their online program is growing it. Portland State has the third worst decline from 19 to 20, the lowest, tied with Western for the lowest decline from 20 to 21, and the second lowest just behind Western of the 2-year period. And this tells me that in size, Portland State is 6 out of 11, 6 out of 11, 7th out of 11. So middle of the pack, a little lower maybe in terms of total enrollment. The size of Portland State, but the changes, the levels, this is the levels down here at the bottom, and this is the rank So Portland State has had a more, you could take these two slides together. Portland State has had a more significant enrollment decline than most of the other schools in the state and most of the other peer institutions. That's what I'm showing you here. So I'm not trying. So let's look at the better news, the appropriation. So this is overall. There's a lot of stuff. Lindsay writes, enrollments are very complicated, and certainly bad news in general doesn't help. I'm not going to get into that bad news, but I certainly understand what you're saying. By means biennium. That's all that by means. So anyway, E and G stands for education in general. That's what that stands for at the bottom. And just looking at these last two bienniums down at the bottom, the last panel at the bottom here, PUSF is Public University Support Fund. PUSF is Public University Support Fund. And for the biennium we're in now, there was a 7.5% increase. There's a small component of it. The request over here in blue, this is what the HECC is requesting. Well, is this going to happen? I don't believe so, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. So this is a better look at it graphically. The state support for all of higher ed. You can see we had declines from the 11 biennium to the 13 biennium. And then every biennium since, we've had an increase in support. And you can see those percentage changes. I stopped at 23. This does not include anything. I don't know what the 23-25 biennium is going to be. So we stop right here at the last one is the 21 to 23 biennium. Now inflation. You could see how inflation has started to affect things. So this is the total support for Oregon higher ed. And I used the West region, the CPI up here. This is the sort of CPI-U, the West region. BLS is the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And so nominally, the green line, you see the appropriation going up. But when you start adjusting for inflation, those increases aren't as strong. So Emily writes, CPI is what our COLAs used to be tied for. Yeah. Well, there's nothing, Emily, there's nothing that prevents that from going forward. But, well, given that CPI is close to 9 these days, I'm not so sure that's going to happen. But you certainly, this gap here, remember, look at the gap between the green and the green and the pink here. There's hardly any gap. There's hardly any inflation 10 years ago. Now the gap between the green and the pink, where my cursor is, wow. So this is the appropriation to PSU only. So just to show you the way, I want to just spend 1 minute the way I set this up. There's two types of money that the state gives to PSU. Operating in the top line here in the orangey, I guess, and debt and capital to pay for capital projects and to help pay off debt, and then the total appropriation. What I have down here is more detail on the operating appropriation. If you look at 21, 1097, that's 109,787,000. The bottom panel says the 109 million is comprised of two things, mostly the state general fund, but a little bit for the state lottery fund. And we know this is the lottery funding for the biennium we're in now. We don't know what it's going to be after that. So I write at the bottom here, they seem to be asking for 20 to 30 more, like this number to be like 130 something million. I think these numbers going up or the biennium, these numbers going up on an annual basis, 7-8 million to me is more likely. You see how it goes up from 111 to 117, the operating appropriation. This is done. Now this could be rescinded, by the way. We're not in 23 yet. We haven't started 23 yet. But it's, the legislature could change it, but unlikely. So these there's no doubt the way things are now, they're going to go higher. And these are just the changes. And so this is graphically what the appropriation, the operating appropriation only to PSU looks like. All right, we got 20 minutes left. Okay. So state unemployment rate and the US hardly moving. I took this directly from, I don't do this very often. State, you can see that I didn't write this. I just took this Oregon Office of Economic Analysis, came from May. We talked about the kicker. Right? Oregon, flood of collections, record year of payments, high income. Oregon has a very progressive income tax structure. So rich people pay a higher percentage, pay a much higher rate. The capital gains the wealthier people had led to huge increases, unexpected revenue growth, unprecedented balances, followed by a record kicker. They have to give money back to you guys. I have a couple of graphs here, general fund revenues and the reserve fund. All wonderful, all good news. And this is the tax structure of your state. Almost all of your state is funded by personal income taxes, a little bit of corporate and some other stuff. Obviously, there's no sales tax in your state. So you can see the overtime. All right, I'll stop there. This is what from the Grapevine data, Grapevine from Illinois State University. This looks at the spending in all of higher education by state. And Oregon, as you see, is 37th out of 50 in state appropriation per capita, per person. But it's getting better, 37% change from 27 to 22, from 17 to 22, higher than the US average. The spending is 259 per capita. The state median is 295. The US average is 318. So that's why Oregon is below the average. Level, not so great. Change, good. I'll just leave it at that. Tuition fee price. I know there are students on here. I don't think you've been students since 08, but if you're on the 15-year plan, there you go. That's what you've been paying. Tuition and fees. Undergraduate resident tuition fees. This is the non-resident. The ratio is, it's become relatively cheaper for out-of-state students. So not much. This is the annual percentage change. This is interesting. I think it just gives you some historical perspective. Back 08 to 012, 5% plus every year, they increased tuition and fees more than 5% every year. Those days are almost over. A couple of years ago, they came back, but certainly nothing like 10%. But there was a 4% increase for fall, starting for fall. And this is the website where I got that from. Starting for fall, this could be a 4% increase in tuition and fees. And this is the detail on that. There's the 4% right there. Right there, my cursor is. 4% increase in tuition and fees. There's the Washington Border District. There's the Washington Undergraduate Exchange. There's other out-of-state. There's different ways that people get to school here. These are all the different fees that students pay. This is tuition's up 3.6. Increase in the building fee. You students pay for those buildings. Health service fee, rec center, incidental. Room and board go up. It's about that. And then the grand total. So, comparing it to other institutions, PSU from 16 to 21, we don't have the 22 or 23 data using iPads. iPads, well, you guys know what iPads is. It's from the Department of Education. And PSU has the largest percentage increase for in-state tuition and the second largest increase for out-of-state tuition of any of the peer institutions. So the level may be low. So what is this telling me? 7th highest tuition in 21 of the peers out of 11. There's 11 total peers, including PSU. PSU tends to is on the bottom half, but they're increasing their tuition the fastest. PSU was 10th in tuition in 2016, now 7th. Because they're increasing, PSU is increasing tuition faster than the peers. All right. Oregon Publics, not much else. The discount rate has not moved. It's hardly moved in 7 years. It was 18.4, now it's 20.1. It was at 20.1 2 years ago. The administration will claim that the rate is higher as they focus on the rate for first year undergrads only, is the real discount rate applied to all students. And the discount rate of peer institutions, PSUs, is on the lower side of both the Oregon peers and the other peers. And what is going to happen to tuition revenue? Tuition revenue is the line green bar. This is the decline in tuition revenue of 4.7% from 20 to 21. We don't know what it is here. The year is almost over. We don't know the answer. We're not going to know the answer until January of 23. And we certainly don't know that. This is the tuition increase. This is the 4% tuition increase. My cursor is now that hard green, shall we say. The hard green bar is the 4% increase in tuition and fees from fall 22 compared to fall 21. The reds are the enrollment declines. Or back here, the reds back in the 08, 09, 10, 11 period, there were enrollment increases. But if you look at it, there's hardly been any enrollment increase in over 10 years. It really makes you wonder. All right, so let's just move on the expense side. Sorry, on the expense side, well, these expenses are per the income statement, the admin who cried wolf. We're going to focus on three expenses: instruction, research, institutional support. What is institutional support? Well, I have the definition here. General admin, central executive level. It is all admin. Most of these other categories. Instruction and research is all us. Institutional support is all them. And I'm sorry for not being more specific, but them is them, the admin. These other categories, public service, academic support, they have elements of both admin and non-admin in them. Academic support has libraries and deans in them, and including to counselors who are part of the union. Student services the same way. Student services has both people who are unionized and people and administrators in there. This one is all them, nothing else. Nobody else is in institutional support but admins. So that's why we focus on those. So this is the percentage distribution. What percent of total expenses go to instruction? In 2021, 34.8%. Auxiliaries, institutional support, and all the other categories. Now, I want to just spend a minute on here. I know I'm running out of time, but auxiliaries. There's no doubt that auxiliaries went down in terms of their revenue, but look at auxiliary expenses. What I have on the bottom of this slide here. Yeah, it's very funny, Emily, inverted. Yeah, I like that. Is the difference between auxiliary revenue and auxiliary expenses. They actually ran a deficit in auxiliaries in 2016, plus 5.7 million in 17, plus 6.7 million in 18, plus 5.2 million in 19, minus 5.2 million in 20, minus 8.6 million in 21. So yes, things turned around, but not to the point of the end of the world. Auxiliaries matter, but they're not a huge factor. And this did hurt. This $13 million shift did hurt, but much more than that in HERF money. So I think this is, yeah, oh my God, look at auxiliary. They went down, but so did auxiliary expenses. I don't know the answer to that, Sarah. I understand the question. I don't know where they would be. My guess is academic support. But David Hansen can, yeah, that'd be my guess. So what I do is I focus on the salary only component of expenses per IPEDS. And I want to thank the team, committee, whoever got me that IPEDS 21 data. When you go to IPEDS website right now, you only see 20. But the people at PSU, you guys were able to deliver the 21 data to me. And so whether me and you delivered the common size, the common data set, which is in here as well. So the data that I asked for that you guys got matters to me a lot. And it's in this, and it's throughout this report. So I don't know who to thank, but I'm thanking somebody who probably knows who they are, and I'll just say, I'll leave it at that. So this is the purest construct we have to judge the administration spending. We're not allocating any costs. It's just, this is the salaries paid to employees in the different functions. Nothing else. No benefits, no allocated costs, no estimated, pure cash paid to people in the different functions. So instructors, what the 51.7% tells me, of the $220 million, my cursor is, of PSU salaries, 114 million, or just over half, went to the instruction category. So auxiliaries are supposed to be self-supporting. Housing, dining, student union, bookstore, athletics. Athletics is a joke that it's self-supporting. And this is the percent, 12.7 and 21, that went to admin. All right, so, and this is a graphic of that distribution for 21. And this is the long-term changes. You see auxiliaries coming down in pink. I have auxiliaries in pink from 19 to 21, the payments to auxiliaries, and the black bar is the whole 5-year period, broken up into a 3-year period in blue, 16 to 19, and a pinkish, purplish 19 to 21 pandemic related period. Look at institutional support. Look at the pink, 19 to 21 increase. Look at that. Unbelievable. There's instruction at the same time going down. It gets worse. This are the 3 main categories I talked about, looking at the peers. So when I add instruction and research, of the 11 peers, PSU is 8th out of 11, okay? They spend less on average than most peers, but they are first in spending on administration. PSU spends a larger proportion on administration than any other institution. So what I have here at the bottom, if PSU spent the median, because there's some down here at the bottom, maybe those are too low. If they spent the median of the peers, they would be spending 6.3 million less per year on administration if PSU just spent what the other schools spent on admin. And this is a graph for the instruction spending, and this is a graph of the admin spending. Congratulations, administration, you are first. And that is your gap right there. Number of employees in iPads, they use a category called management. Now remember, I don't want anyone to say this is my or Howard's data. This data is submitted to the federal government by the Portland State Administration. I don't make this data up. 6-minute warning, I hear you. I'm on slide 82, I'm getting there. We'll go faster with that. Look at the number of admins. Oh my God. Even in the pandemic, they're going, could you stop hiring more people, please? And so average salary, the admins, these are the other employee categories in iPads. These are iPads categorizations. The average admin makes just under $140,000. Faculty. Let me just get to the graphs. Okay, part-time versus full-time faculty over the last 5-6 years. Decline in full-time faculty, flat, somewhat down. Well, you guys can present it all you like. I think that's the key, is to what to use here. We could talk about that. This really, take this picture home with you. The percentage change in the number of employees from 17 to 20, 20 to 22, and then 17 to 22. All three, the 2 subperiods, and in total, 49% increase in number of management, number of tenured faculty, tenured track faculty in general going down, non-tenured track faculty going down. So I don't see how this happens. I don't see how they get away with hiring more of them. And this is not laying people off. This is just not replacing people when they leave, which you guys may feel. Okay, your salaries, you may not know this, but you're not doing well versus inflation in the last couple of years. Salary savings. So the black bar is inflation. The pink bar, purple bar is where you guys are. This is all ranks, not just, so, which I think I've come around on this one. I used to not use all ranks, now I use it. You guys are not doing well versus inflation. The gap is really bad here in the last year. There's inflation 9%, roughly. And versus your peers, toward the bottoms, all the categories toward the bottom below, except for instructor, which not all the other schools put into that category. But I still think it's helpful. You know, Christine Sheldon asked the question. I'm sorry, I know I only have 6 minutes left. When I look at the best way I could answer that question, Christelle, is this is the category I'm using. So what do you think this means? I mean, how do you get in there? So that's what I would focus on. I don't see that as what you're talking about. Student advisors are not in, there's no way a student advisor is institutional support. Not a chance. That I'll tell you for sure. There's no way that's happening. They're not in there. So there's the faculty salaries. There are you guys, the all ranks, a little lower. And not lost some ground from 19 to 22 versus your peers. All right, next to last thing, athletics. You're running a deficit every year, 11 million, 10 million, 10 million, 9 million, 8 million, 12 million. Every year, revenues are less. Expenses are much bigger than revenues in athletics every single year. And the percent subsidy, this is the percentage of expenses that have to be subsidized by student fees. You guys, as students, pay a fee for athletics, whether you go to games or not, and school funds. The reason why PSU runs a deficit is that ticket sales are basically, I hate to say this, close to zero. I know you're in the Big Sky Conference. I'm aware of that. Now, the only good news is you have smaller deficits than most of your peers. I don't know if this makes you feel any better. It should not. And this picture tells the story. Look at the direct athletic revenues, which is ticket sales, contributions, licensing, TV money, etc. There's the athletic expenses. This big increase, coaches' salaries. It was a $3 million increase in coaches' salaries from 2019 to 2020. I really would like the NCAA, if you guys, I could continue to work with you guys, the NCAA management report for 2021. I'd like to add 2021 to this graph. I think it would help you guys in bargaining. And I'll try to give you guys specifics exactly what I'm asking for. I want to add one more year to this graph. I know it's not going to change, but this also shows that it has nothing to do with the pandemic. The pandemic did not drive the athletic deficit. Going back to 15, look at the direct athletic revenues, this last group of colored bars here. Look at the athletic subsidy, the academic subsidy. This is the subsidy from the students and the core mission to prop up athletics. And I'm a big sports fan, believe in sports, but I don't know. All right, degrees, great. You guys keep graduating people. Graduation rates are higher, which is good. But this is, I'm not convinced though. This is the one that bothers me. This is the one that bothers me. You lose 27% of the students after 1 year. Got to figure out a way to change this. And it hasn't changed. It's hardly changed. Students start fall 20, back fall. This has not changed. And class size, I'll leave that and I'll leave the rest. So last thoughts. I believe PSU has the resources to not make, they have sufficient reserves, resources, even with declines in enrollment, to not make cuts. The focus should be, to me, on that retention issue. Trying to keep those kids who are here 1 year. Losing more than 1/4 of your students after 1 year. Doesn't that bother you guys? It bothers me. I think that's a high number. there's no way they're reducing academic advising. I can't imagine that's what's happening. But if that is happening, that's a major issue to me. All their financial problems would be solved if student retention was better. Again, this graph really bugs me. Sorry, but it does. This one right here really bugs me. So I'll leave it at that. All right, I'm done.
Thank you so much, Howard. I wonder if we can give Howard a virtual.
Yeah, so I'll fix a couple of things, like fix those double twos. I'll fix a couple of things and send this to you guys tonight. And you guys use it as, you don't have to ask me. You could ask me my opinion on what graphs I think are important. The management graph, this one here. I mean, I assume the people in the chat are correct in that they're getting rid of advisors. That makes that doesn't make any sense. I mean, is that really happening, that they're getting rid of academic advisors? Or really, that can't be happening. In what they're leaving because they're not being paid enough. Advisors are leaving. Wow. No reduction in position, people just leaving and not being replaced. Getting rid of them by not paying them. Wow, look at Emily, the comments. I can't keep it. They're coming so fast. I can't keep up with them. All right, appreciate that. All right, it's hard to keep, but the advising thing is something I can't. That's something I think matters, and this is the result. This is what you see on this screen as a result when you lose that many students. I'm not saying this is going to be 100%, but this is too low. From my experience, this is too low for a place like PSU. I think you do well once you get them here. Once you keep them here past 1 year, the graduation rate overall is pretty good. But this you're losing too many right away. And there's some things you can't do. Some people, there's some. But if this is 5 points better, the financial ramifications are enormous. If this thing is 5 points better, I've said my piece.
Yeah, I think we can all agree. Thank you so much.
All right.
For your time. Thank you everyone who made it here today, the bargaining team. Thank you.
Shout out to Dave Hansen, even though I don't see him. Hi, David. Yeah. I don't know if I see you. I'm just saying hi.
And to Heather Namias for arranging, our administrative director, for arranging all of the refreshments.
Yes, thank you, Heather.
The spot in Zoom, and the room in Smith. So we're so glad to have you here. Please stay tuned this summer to your email for newsletter updates, invites to watch bargaining, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We appreciate all of you.